Okay. Shalom, everyone. Welcome to Nativ on Wednesday night. Um, I've been negligent and I shouldn't be, but for those who are listening and have not chosen to sign on to YouTube or wherever you're listening from, hope you will pick us up off of nativ.com. So you can get at us from Facebook or YouTube, which is where I go. And it's more than just myself, and it's more than Rod. It's several rabbis who speak and share good stuff, good Old Testament stuff. Now, I want to talk to you tonight about something that's, well, the more I teach, the more I find myself, well, we're only beginning the third chapter, and we're witnessing at this point a hand coming down from heaven and spreading out a scroll before the prophet. Now we saw that it was written on both sides and filled with lamentations and with mourning and woe. Now the Targum records that it in the following manner. It says, and written in it was what happened from the beginning and what is destined to happen in the end. And it was written that if the house of Israel transgresses the Torah, the nation shall, uh, the nation shall rule over them. But if they practice Torah, lamentations, mourning, and woe shall depart from them, which is pretty simple. Tonight, we're going to talk about the scroll that Ezekiel is dealing with. But it brought back to my mind the scroll that's found in Daniel. And so part of this time, I want to be sharing with you not only Ezekiel's scroll, but I want to also share with you the scroll that Daniel had. They both are written in such a way that they have a particular audience. And so as we're going through this, I hope you can recognize that prophecy and um, not all writing is the same. Now, God commanded Ezekiel to eat the scroll. Now, it's beyond the realm of possibilities that he should actually do that. But what is surely to be understood is that he was to internalize its message. Now, some of it will be rebuke, some of it will be foreseeing future tragedies, and some of it will foretell the end that will occur at the end of time. But whatever was said, Ezekiel was told to ready himself for the mission, and that mission was to the house of Israel, not to the world, just to the house of Israel. Now, God would fortify Ezekiel in his presentation for his mission, warning him that whereas any other nation would heed God's rebuke, the Jewish nation, had become so brazen and so hard-hearted. Ezekiel is sent with the understanding that if they were any other nation, they would have reacted differently to those things he would soon say. In Ezekiel 3:5, we learn that the problem was not one of diction or communication, because remember they had only they'd only been in uh, exile. Ezekiel had for 5 years, not long enough for them to lose their Hebrew understanding. And language would never prove to be a problem between the prophet and God's people. They simply would choose not to listen and therefore disregarded the prophet's message. Ezekiel is promised the moral strength necessary to stand up to their insolence. How will this happen? Well, he would be given a shmear. What's a shmear? A shmear was a, well, just his forehead looked different. It was something impressed upon it. Rashi saw it as a particular type of hard rock. Radak said it was iron or a metal that's even harder than that. Now the sages saw that the shmear was really a worm which possessed the ability to split rocks that were going to be used to build a temple. Now the problem is that according to the writings, there wasn't supposed to be any sound from any instrument. So the sound was gone because of these shmir. They simply cut the temple stones. Now, Ezekiel was asked by God to take into his heart a message that would certainly cause his ears and his mind to rebel. You see, he understood the problem through the scroll, and the message was firmly locked into his heart. And the language which filled his ears, well, it had no meaning. Now, despite their insolence, the Jewish people remained one solid and cohesive community because of what he learned from the scroll. Notice he is to speak to them. Now, the word devar is used when we talk about speaking. It's a very concise expression, and it also comes with a harsh tone. But notice the sentence, and devar speaks, and he speaks to them. Now, there's another word that could have been used, and that's the word amar, say to them. Now, this idea of amar refers to a soft and an understanding tone. My wife often talks to me about the fact that I'm using devar, when actually she would prefer I would use amar. Now, he was he was to give a complete explanation, a fully formed thought. And he wasn't satisfied with laying before them a dry, formal statement, but to share his thoughts or his persuasiveness, if you will. Now, Ezekiel is now commanded to come to the exile and well, what do I want to say? Share with them this clear message and make it poignant. Now, so far we have witnessed the vision of the chariot moving through a stormy wind, a great cloud with flashing fire, and the color of hashmal or amber amid the fire. Now, we watched four living beings with at least four faces move with a chariot. And the fact that the wheels had eyes, well, by now I hope you can sense this wasn't just symbolic, but it was actually experiential. And it was almost meditative. Ezekiel was a member of the royal priesthood. He was one of only two prophets who's ever going to prophesy or gain his prophecies from outside the land. Most of them got them directions at the mountain, the Temple Mount. Now, at the end of chapter 2, we began to see a transition. Ezekiel was asked by God to digest a scroll that had contained writing on both the front and the back. But this only happened after this vision came. He did not eat the scroll at first. The text says the scroll was filled with the lamentations, with the mourning, and with the woe. Now, in Torah, writing was usually found to be only on one side of the parchment. Two-sided writing speaks of a total saturation. There was no blank space left. Mystically, this scroll represented truth without cushioning. We are looking at reality as God saw it, not filtered for human comfort. And it begins by saying, and it tasted as sweet as honey. Now that paradox is the key to the rest of the story. So why does the bitterness become sweet? Well, here's the deep secret, and this connects directly to themes we've been circling around for months. As truth is often bitter before it is integrated, and truth is sweet after it becomes true for you. The scroll contains judgment and mercy, as well as the idea of collapse and the idea of tikkun or repair. The sages tell us that once it is eaten, it is no longer critical. but it becomes, well, it becomes clarifying. This is why Ezekiel is not crushed by it. He was quieted by God's explanation. And so what he does do is he eats, but then the question is, what does eating mean? This is not a metaphorical, it's functional. To eat the scroll meant that Ezekiel was externalizing it. This is about them. It's about the people. Now, in Kabbalistic terms, we need to understand that the word describes from, well, let me put it this way. There were three levels of understanding in this story. The first is called Hokmah. It's called wisdom or insight. The second is the idea of Binah, understanding. And the final way is it was about knowledge, knowledge that was designed to change the knower. Now, those who have been studying with me these many months have been tracking the concepts of exile and return. The Erev Rav, or the mixed multitude that we find in the book of Genesis and the Exodus and on the way through, well, that speaks of judgment that heals, the idea of feminine restoration and cycles of collapse and renewal. Now, the scroll is, well, it's the point where it stops being a map and becomes a voice. Not a voice telling you what will happen and when, but a voice telling you how to continue to stand when it does. And notice the scroll is offered, but it's not shoved at him. Only after Ezekiel eats the scroll does God say, now go to my people. This first is internally given to him. It's articulated. Never the other way around. And notice Ezekiel is warned that they may not listen. Can you imagine? The eating is not for success. The eating is about faithfulness. You see, only after Ezekiel eats the scroll does God say, now go to the people. I want to briefly go through the scroll itself, or at least these 10 verses, 12 verses, and go give you a very short synopsis of what it says. We begin actually in the second chapter, because the second chapter, the bottom 3 verses, actually are the lead-in to the story. But you, son of man, hear what I speak to you. Do not be rebellious like the rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. Now the prophet is warned regarding before he eats he was going to be speaking to the rebellious house. Israel, that danger is not opposition from others, but it's actually inner resistance. Ezekiel is opening his mouth is an act of consent. Now, before prophecy can flow forward, the prophet is not capable of being defended inwardly. So in 2:10, he goes on to say, and I looked, and behold, a hand was stretched out to me, and it was a scroll of a book. Now, initially, this book comes from above. Ezekiel does not or could not reach for the scroll. It had to be lowered to him. Now, the prophet was chosen for this particular mission. He didn't volunteer for it. This mirrors what went on at Sinai. Israel did not invent Torah. It was given to them. Now, in the last verse in this chapter, it says, and he spread it before me. And it was written on the front and the back, and written on it with lamentations, mourning, and woe. The fact that it was written on both the front and the back is significant. The fact that it talks about lamenting and about mourning and about woe, well, that's not divine cruelty, but it is historical truth. Judgment here should be seen as diagnostic. It's not vindictive. God is not a vindictive God. Now, I read in the Bible several places where his wrath was there, but our wrath, human wrath, is not the same as the wrath which God speaks to. And he gives you the facts. And the reason he does that is so you can experience healing. Now, he said to me, Son of man, eat what you find. Eat this scroll and go speak to the house of Israel. Notice the order. Eat, then go speak. He is not to bypass the process of internalization. Prophecy without digestion becomes accusations. Prophecy without digestion, well, it becomes only a witness. Now, it says in the second verse, so I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat the scroll. Notice Ezekiel is always a part of this discussion. He's talking about himself. Ezekiel opens his mouth, but God causes the eating. This was a partnership, human willingness and divine action. Transformation happens where consent meets grace. In the third verse, he goes on to say, and he said to me, Son of man, feed your belly and fill your stomach with this scroll that I'm giving you. So then I ate it, and so it was sweet as honey in my mouth. Another paradox. The content is bitter, while the taste is sweet. Did you notice that sweetness comes after internalization, not before? This is dot. This is where knowledge unifies opposites. Truth can no longer be fragmented by the soul. It's permanently installed. And he said to me, Son of man, go to the house of Israel and speak my words to them. So Ezekiel is not speaking his words. He is speaking God's words that were now housed within him. God's words have now moved from the object to an internal device in his speech. So for you, excuse me, need a drink. For you are not sent to the people of obscure speech. Surely had I sent you to them, they would have listened. Israel understood the language, but the people resisted the meaning. Some believed that foreigners would would respond differently or even better. But this was not the result with the Jewish people. The hard truth is that closeness can breed resistance, and familiarity can dull your reference. By verse 7, he goes on to say, But the house of Israel will not listen to you, because they will not listen to me. Understand, God knew the people, for the most part, would reject his prophecies. Even so, God wanted his point to be out there, and so he depersonalizes it with the coming of rejection. Rejection of the prophet was more than, well, it was more than it was a rejection of God. Ezekiel was freed from needing approval. This verse guarded the prophet's heart from bitterness and from, well, it gave him emotional protection. Now, behold, I have made your face strong against their faces, and your forehead strong against their foreheads. God provided for Ezekiel what I call, or what I can only describe as inner fortification. Strength here is not aggressive. It's a steadfastness. He was able to withstand the hardening that was going on around him and not become bitter. Now, unlike adamant, harder than flint, I have made your forehead. So here he proclaims with clarity, without cruelty, the prophet is firm, but he's not sharp by default. Remember way back when he gave him the smear forehead. Moreover, he said to me, all my words that I speak to you receive in your heart and hear with your ears. Now, I used to tell my students it is better to engage your hearing before your mouth. So remember, receive, hear, then speak. I don't know how many times I used that, but I used it a lot. I was an elementary teacher. We need to make the heart the primary vessel when sharing your thinking or, well, not your tongue. Ezekiel receives his marching orders. Go to the exiles, whether they hear or whether they refuse to hear. So the prophet's task was present. Well, actually, it was to present the truth, but the results could not be measured in any human measure. Please understand, I don't believe this passage is about becoming a prophet. It's about being filled with truth without being crushed by it. Ezekiel was exposed to the vision, yet he remained silent as he was ingesting strength for his mission that had no guarantees. Now, before going further, I want to track a link between this scroll and the sealed scroll of Daniel chapter 12. You see, these are the two scrolls that I read about here. There's only one other scroll, and that's the one that was found in the days of Josiah. No. Let me think about that again. Daniel is instructed to seal the words of the scroll he received until the time of the end. So it's indicating that there's a full understanding of these prophecies would not be revealed until the later time. Even some would be incomprehensible, even till the end of time. Now, this sealing suggests that knowledge and understanding will increase as the end approaches, with many seeking to comprehend the messages contained within the scroll. We're in that period of time when this seems to be happening more and more. Now, why is it important that Ezekiel eats the scroll and Daniel seals his scroll? Ezekiel's scroll was to be opened and eaten. In both cases, the scrolls were already written. What does it tell us? Well, Ezekiel's scroll is about his own generation for the most part, addressing some, moral spiritual reality. Now, this message wasn't meant to be digested and not decoded. Ezekiel was in exile, but his message was concerned with his generation, and while in exile, it was happening to be fulfilled then and continues now. So obviously, Daniel's scroll was written to a different people and a different audience and was there to be revealed and sealed until a later time. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and sealed the book until the time of the end. Daniel 12, verses 9 and 10. The words were understood to be pure or true. The visions were seen, but the book was sealed, and the understanding that its meaning would be deferred to a time of the end. Now, Daniel was not meant to understand what he was reading or hearing. Daniel's scroll was about a future epic. It involves cosmic timelines, and it requires some sort of historical understanding, and it was not for immediate integration or consumption. This revelation was meant to be preserved, not absorbed. Ezekiel's eating and Daniel's sealing was about timing. His message was a prophecy that spoke of imminent survival. The message didn't live inside the people. It would shape each person's posture, their endurance, and their repentance. The truth was bitter, but following his measure, it would lead them to survival. Now, Daniel's message dealt with what I'd call long cycles. He mapped empires, and he spoke in terms of numbers and years, and he spoke of an end time pattern. Had they swallowed it, as Ezekiel's people were to do, it would have resulted in, well, premature digestion and actually more confusion because it would distort the area that they were living in. Now, as a result, they would have brought confusion to the people. So both Ezekiel and Daniel are writing from Babylon. Both are addressing life after the temple, and both were responding to a world where God feels hidden. Yet they responded differently. Ezekiel's exile task. Try it again. Ezekiel's exile task was to rebuild an inner sanctuary, not a new church, not a new building. It was resigned to do that inner sanctuary within. He was to restore responsibility, and each that God still speaks to. Now, it was for that reason that Daniel was told to seal his book. What must shape Ezekiel's character was eaten, but what was to shape history, well, that was sealed. Now, Daniel's task then was to preserve hope across centuries, anchor faith beyond visible redemption, and seek that God governs there and then. Now, one teaches us how to live, the other teaches us how history will end. Ezekiel eats the scroll and finds it to be sweet immediately. Daniel, on the other hand, does not eat his scroll, but he's told many shall purify themselves and understand. Now, the sweetness in Daniel is postponed. Understanding itself becomes a sweetness, but only when history catches up with prophecy. Now, we are doing something very specific right now. We're letting Ezekiel's scroll be eaten. We are now looking at Daniel's scroll, but we can't try to force it. The sealed scroll is not unlocked by curiosity. It's unlocked by time and personal refinement. Daniel is told, "Go your way, you shall rest and then shall rise." Now, understanding comes after reliability. We have now, I believe, reached this time, the moment when the two scrolls are actually meeting, and knowledge is now becoming edible in both scrolls. This is where prophecy stops being archived and starts becoming very, very real. We're going to trace when and how the sealed scroll becomes edible without forcing dates and codes and sensationalism. The text itself gives us the rules. Now, I've already taught you before this the scroll of Daniel. We went through the chapters there. And I've gone through before this the scroll of Zechariah. Now I'm working on the third scroll. This is where prophecy stops being archived and starts becoming very, very real. We're going to trace the sealed scroll, which becomes edible without forcing it. Go your way, Daniel, for the weeks are shut up and are sealed until the time of the end. That's 12:9, Daniel. But then comes the condition. Many shall purify themselves, refine themselves, and be clarified, which is the next verse. This is the critical part. The scroll does not open because someone is clever, or they crack the code, or even becomes someone figures out the whole thing. It opens because the people are changing. Moral refinement precedes intellectual revelation. I need to share with you a Hebrew definition. The definition is for the word in Hebrew called unsealing. Unsealing does not mean someone has full comprehension or has predictive mastery or even comes to understand the future. We should be Ben Sekel, understand by knowing. In biblical terms, to understand means to align, to preserve patterns, or to perceive patterns, and to know how to stand rightly at the end of these times. So when Daniel says, wise shall understand, he means the refined will recognize what kind of moment this is, not what will happen next, but where we are in history. Here's a hidden archive. Daniel's scroll cannot be opened until Ezekiel's scroll has been eaten. So in order to understand Daniel, you really need to make sure you've eaten, digested Ezekiel. Why? Because Daniel seals in timelines and empires and cosmic transitions. Without Ezekiel, that knowledge produces fear, and it produces obsession and, well, spiritual arrogance, desire. Ezekiel teaches his people how to live without the temple, how to hear God while they're in exile, how judgment and mercy coexist, and how truth becomes sweet inside. Only that kind of person can safely approach Daniel. Now, there's a quiet bridge between the two scrolls. In Ezekiel 3:11, it says, "Go to the exiles where they hear or receive or refuse to hear." He also is told in Daniel, "Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." Now, these are not about activities. They're about circulation of awareness. Daniel's scroll comes when truth is already shaped and the character of many people, well, exile has matured the soul, and people can hear without panicking. Now, the sealed scroll becomes edible when knowledge stops being external and starts being lived. That's why you can already sense this is coming. Right now, you can feel the scrolls are open, but only partially, and often bittersweet, because the final stage is not, it's not explainable. It's integrated. No shortcuts, no spectacle, no panic. You are not invited to decode Daniel. You're invited to recognize the convergence between the two books. So take time to notice patterns. Patterns here, patterns in Daniel, patterns that you, well, patterns from Zechariah. Understanding is situational awareness. It's not prediction. Ezekiel teaches us how to eat truth, while Daniel teaches us how not to rush through it. And when time comes, these scrolls won't feel foreign. They won't need to be forced. In fact, they will taste familiar because you've already learned how to digest it. All right. This is the inner core of apocalyptic literature. Not the beasts, not the numbers, not the drama. Remember what Hebrew wisdom is about. The refined will recognize what kind of moment this is, not what will happen next, but where we are in history. If we miss the apocalyptic text, well, it becomes either terrifying or trivial. And if we get it, we become very stable. What witness or what wisdom does mean the same thing in the apocalyptic text. Wisdom is not intellectual or intellectual. It's not educational. It's not secret information. It's not about the ability to predict events and not about the decoding symbols or timelines. Apocalyptic literature actively resists that kind of mastery. Daniel says, I heard, but I did not understand. And he was not rebuked for that. Now, there are three Hebrew words quietly governed apocalyptic wisdom. The first is chokmah, which is really insight, which is a quick burst of perception, seeing something that matters. Now, binah is discernment. It's the ability to distinguish between things that look similar. And finally, da'at is integrated knowing, knowledge that shapes posture, behavior, and the fear of God. Apocalyptic wisdom lives primarily in binah and da'at, not in hakmah. It's about our orientation, and it's not about the answers. We learned in Daniel 12:10, many shall purify themselves, refine themselves, and be clarified. But the wicked shall act wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. Do you see what's missing? There's no mention of study or revelation or intelligence. Understanding comes from purification, and it comes from refinement and moral clarity. Wisdom is the refined inner instrument. Okay, so why do apocalyptic texts use symbols? Symbols are not puzzles, they're filters. A symbol reveals truth to the discerning and conceals it from the unprepared. That's not elitism, it's spiritual safety. A beast, a horn, a number, well, it can't be used to control or be exploited easily. So if the text asks you who are you when you approach it, it is not asking you what you know, but where you are in time. In fact, that's really crucial. Apocalyptic wisdom is situational awareness. I know you probably read Ecclesiastes 3:1-8. To everything there is a season and a time and every purpose under the heavens. I believe the closer we get to the 6,000th year cycle, the end of it, not on our calendar, but on the Hebrew calendar, it's going to become crucial to recognize the season we're in, to know how to stand and to know what faithfulness looks like. Wisdom tells you how to live, not what will happen next. Why is it that wickedness cannot understand? Well, the wicked are not locked out of intellectually. They're locked out existentially, because apocalyptic truth requires humility. History is not under your control or mine. Patience as a resolution is delayed. And because of moral responsibility, you must choose rightly. Without certainty, you're lost. One last thought. I haven't taught the Dead Sea Scrolls, but there's one scroll in there that I find fascinating, and I read it often, and that's called the War Scroll. It's also referred to as the battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. It's one of the clearest windows we have into how Second Temple Jews lived apocalyptic wisdom rather than merely thinking about it. What is striking is how restrained and ethical it is, that it is beneath the cosmic language. Now, the core text, the rule of the community, well, that's the heart of Qumran's worldwide appearance or opinion. Two spirits were teaching. But we begin with a claim that sounds extreme, but it isn't psychologically. God created two spirits to walk this earth. The spirit of truth, which he calls light, and the spirit of deceit, which he calls darkness. This is not a story of two gods, but it is an ethical cosmic realism. Reality is morally structured. At Qumran, these are not emotions or vague spiritual vibes. Light is associated with things like humility, patience, truthfulness, restraint, fidelity to a covenant, teachable moments, and reverence for God's timing. Now, darkness, on the other hand, is associated with arrogance, with impulsiveness, with manipulation, with deceit, impatience for control, domination, contempt for limits. Darkness is not ignorance. It is a misaligned will. This is wisdom language, or this is wisdom language, not spiritual superstition. The shocking part, darkness is temporary. Qumran insists on something very Job-like, or much from Daniel or Ezekiel. Darkness exists by permission, not because of sovereignty. The Prince of Darkness operates for a time, and when a prescribed time is as part of the refining process. Now, this keeps Qumran from despair. Darkness is real, but it's not final. Wisdom at Qumran is about choosing a side daily, light versus darkness. It's not a one-time conversation. It's a daily alignment. The community believed that every thought, every word, every action tilts or balances us one way or the other. And it's not just about history. Wisdom here speaks and thinks in terms of vigilance, not anxiety, but attentiveness. Now, the Qumran community avoids dates and predictions. This surprises most people. Despite apocalyptic language, Qumran was not fixing an end date, nor decoding timelines, and it didn't rush timelines at all. Why? Because forcing the end is seen as the darkness, as to, well, build on that impulse of darkness. They held that that impatience belongs to the spirit of deceit. Light trusts God's timing when things will happen. This is extremely disciplined apocalyptic wisdom. Now, the people of Qumran believed individuals could not stay in the light alone. So they created a community that was based on shared meals, confessions of faults, upgraded responsibility, silence and listening, constant Torah immersion. So why did they do that? Because darkness thrives in isolation, in secrecy, in unchecked certainty. Light was believed to thrive in communal correction. And this is why wisdom made social. Qumran speaks of an end-time war, where the sons of light and the sons of darkness, a war with angelic armies and with cosmic confrontations. But here is the key: that war is already happening inside the human heart. External wars only mirror an internal alignment that has already taken place. If the heart is not aligned, no external victory matters. Qumran resolves a dangerous tension. Apocalyptic truth can awaken hope, or it can justify cruelty. Qumran chooses hope, but it binds it to moral restraint. Now, you can't claim to be of the light while lying and humiliating or manipulating or rushing God. Excuse me. I know this is a lesson that lasts longer than normal, but stick with me. I'm almost done. This is one of the most this is one of the most important ethical safeguards in apocalyptic literature. Hopefully you can now see the thread there. Ezekiel speaks of eating the truth. Daniel was told to wait with the truth. And another character that fits with the Second Temple period would have been Job, who endured without explanation. And finally, Qumran, who attempted daily to align with their truth. Well, light has to be your source. Light is patience. Okay, one final thought. For Qumran, wisdom was about choosing light when darkness offers faster results. That we may be why their voice was seen as quiet, was seen as disciplined, and was seen as having restraint. They felt trustworthiness. Now, next week, we're going to continue chapter 3, but the subject matter is going to change quite a bit. But now that I've given you this much information, I want you to reflect on this portion of the chapter. I want you to find words within there that you can mull over in your mind or meditate about. Begin to think about your own spot within the community. Where do you fit? Which ones do you demonstrate? Next week? Well, next week is next week, provided God lets us. Shalom, everyone. Have a great night. Thank you for listening to me. And please tune in to Nativ. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Steve. Fantastic. Alex says thanks as well.
Uh, Thank you.
You really verbalized the whole situation really that's going on now.
Absolutely.
So perfectly and obviously a person who's driven by that one element of wisdom knows exactly what you're talking about. I mean, it was incredible, incredible.
Thank you. I
It was
hoped I
very
got
inspiring, by the way.
that's what I was going for.
Yeah, very, very inspiring.
So keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
So anyway, anybody else? Of course not. I got all quiet people on. Lori's not here. Her brother Bobby's not here.
Okay. So all the loudmouths are not here. So,
That's what I'm trying to say. So
well, you did a
anyway,
fantastic job, Steve. I really appreciate it.
well, I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. We'll see you in the morning.
All right. You have
Shalom.
a good night, all of you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Shalom.